Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But you know, KSJE is now listener-supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast. Joining me this morning for our regular conversation here on KSJE, the Superintendent of Schools for the Aztec School District, Superintendent Kirk Carpenter, is joining me this morning via Zoom. Superintendent Carpenter, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning, Scott, and again, thanks for having me on and taking time to visit with us.
Of course, you bet. It's always great to have you on to talk about what's been going on at Aztec Schools, and so we could get started by you just had a big meeting on Wednesday to kind of talk about moving forward, and so can you give us an update on what you discussed there?
Yeah, you know, we've I think several meetings as we think about what we're trying to do to move forward, and one of them we had a meeting with legislators on Wednesday, and then you know, there's other meetings and updates we're continually getting from the public education department. So I think initially maybe to start with some of the work we're trying to do even with other superintendents. We've met with a group of superintendents and other county officials from the different towns, including the actual county officials. In Farmington, we had some folks from the city there, and I think that's probably the best place to start. And some of the things we're trying to do is work collaboratively, which we do well up here with all of our school districts, and we have tremendous cooperation with all of them, and the different cities as well. And the big discussion was, you know, trying to move our county to more of a positive trend line, if you will, because we feel like that it's not just important for businesses, which is huge, because that's the economic impact, but also as we move different levels, which they have the red, yellow, green.
Right.
And red being the worst case scenario, which all counties, I think, except for maybe one in the state may be in at this time, is trying to develop some campaigns of reminding people that it's going to take all of us to get the trend lines to change. And one of the big messages we're trying to send out is everybody go get tested. I mean, if for the purposes of changing the percentage of people that have COVID, don't have COVID, the only way to really do that is to make sure we're getting more people tested. And so that's one big message I know that all the districts and many of the other cities and counties is sending out, is to have their people go get tested, because that's going to impact not only opening up the county for more businesses and normal operations, whatever that may look like, even when we get to yellow or green, but it's obviously going to impact too, I think, a lot of the decision making that they make as far as getting schools totally open instead of just doing elementary hybrid. We need to get our secondary students back. It's absolutely a necessity, and not just from the learning standpoint, but the social emotional impact that it's having on our students. And so all of this is a collaborative conversation and things we're trying to do. There's going to be some messaging that's going to be going out, and just trying to appeal to people to remind them that this is not a political issue. This is a health issue. And being a health issue, it's going to take everybody to turn it around. And so that's what we're going to try to do. And again, trying to get some changes in some of the trend lines will absolutely alleviate and open up the county more for the right reasons, and get businesses back going, get schools, hopefully students back sooner, that type of thing, because they are going to make county by county decisions. Right.
And did it seem to you that the legislators that you spoke with seemed kind of agreeable with this idea of moving forward and trying to do this on a county by county basis?
Yes, and I think we had further discussions, which I can mention momentarily, but they're all on board. They all want the same things we want, but I want to preface that statement, if I can, with the idea that nobody wants to take any shortcuts. You often hear me say it, and I'll say it again: no seductive shortcuts on any of this, as far as safety. But we also know that when you look at the data, which educators, obviously that's our world, we dive down deep into it, that the rate of COVID among the school population kids is very low, very, very low. And schools themselves are doing such different things to keep schools even more clean. and more sanitized and having to cohort students. So there's a lot of that type of information that we're continuing trying to share with the governor's office. I was able to speak to the lieutenant governor yesterday, and we had a good conversation, and he too is in the same court as far as trying to get kids back. But again, the governor's getting advice from very important people that are far smarter than I am. But the idea is we need to make some adjustments, and we do need to get our kids back, not just in school, but back into athletics, activities, all the things that our secondary students are so used to. And it's been 9 months. I don't think a lot of people realize that since students have walked onto a campus, because this all started back in March. So that's been the messaging. There's some plans being put together to say if we get to a certain percent, even different than what they are categorizing as red, yellow, and blue, the percentages to move, can we start looking at select groups such as seniors and those types of things, and specific groups of seniors that may need more assistance than others? Because again, we're losing our kids academically, social, emotionally. And the number of suicides across the state has just been just horrific. And some of it absolutely related to some kids having a hard time dealing with some of these things. And obviously there's other causes. It's not the only cause. I would never say that. I'm not a mental health specialist. But what we do know is kids, they're suffering in many, many respects. And so we do need to get them back for the right reasons and under the right circumstances. And that can be a local decision. And that's one of the things we also talk to the legislators about.
Right. And of course, they are getting ready to head to Santa Fe, or maybe head there virtually for the legislative session in early 2021. And so this would be something that maybe they could chime in on when it comes to the legislature. And I imagine budgets and funding was another big important part of your conversations with them?
It was, Scott. There were several topics, and every year the Superintendent's Association develops a platform, and I think some of the highlights of what we discussed today, the funding is obviously going to be a huge concern. That with the numbers of students that are not in school districts right now, if you take the funding for this year and try to apply that to next year, it's not going to work. And so that was one of the big conversations: is holding school districts harmless on both the transportation allocations and the operational funds. Something that's happened in the past and what is happening right now is school districts are building up pretty large operational reserves, because that basically for everybody to understand, those are the cash balances. But there's a lot of money not being spent right now that will have to be spent as we come back from COVID and address all those issues. And there's a lot of other things to keep into account. For example, athletics. If we're able to move forward with athletics in the spring, we're not going to produce any kind of revenue to cover some of those costs. So all of that's going to have to come out of operational reserves. So we reiterated the importance of leaving those alone. And it sounds like that will happen, but I know in years past they've done what they call a clawback, where they've taken reserve money from school districts to put it back in and help balance the budget. And that's nothing short of, and I said it today and I will say it again, that taking cash reserves from districts is nothing short of just taking money out of the pockets of our students, because that's where that money goes eventually, and there's reasons for it. And it's not a situation of just trying to hoard money. It's trying to be responsible. And there were a lot of other topics. Local decision making was one of the big ones, reiterating the importance that one size does not fit all. I mean, we have grading practices that are being adjusted in each district. They're looking at how they're doing those things, and everybody needs to have the ability to do things separately, and the public education department has given the autonomy to do that. But that's just one example of why local control is so important, and so many other issues. They had the budget this year is going to be better than we originally thought, so that's positive, but it's going to be tougher as we go the next couple years because of the way things are going to be. And so decisions made this year are not going to be just done for this year and get through the pandemic. That's not what it's all about. It's these decisions are going to set up a lot of the future success or failures that we have in years to come as educators in our different districts. And other things mentioned, safety, as something's always been near and dear to my heart, has been even prior to 2017 when we had our incident. But talking about what we can do to create like an anonymous tip line for every single school district and make sure that's in place, and it's not a lottery system. If kids are in crisis, they need the ability to reach in, and they need to have a way to reach in or other people to reach in. And we fortunately in our county have a very good system with the Sandy Hook Promise program that all the districts have put in, and many of the other programs as well. So up here we're good, but it's not just about us. We're seeing just cases and cases of social emotional issues, and we need to provide avenues. So just a lot of topics, a lot of conversation. I think pretty optimistic in many respects, but at the same time, there's going to be some major changes on committees in Santa Fe. Getting kids back into school was obviously what dominated the conversation. But the legislators, as they said, they can do all they can to advocate, but ultimately the decisions are going to come from the fourth floor, and that's the governor's office. And so just continue the conversation around the current issues and those issues to come, because we still have to plan. But we may need to make sure that the funding is the big issue, that we do it with appropriate funding levels, not just to get through with what we're facing, but the open door costs, the increases in insurance, all those types of things are going to hit us. And so, again, we're very fortunate to have the legislative body we do in San Juan County. They get with us, they listen to us, they call us when they need to, and so we just appreciate all the work they do.
I'm hearing maybe a few positives from what you're talking about, Mr. Carpenter, about the budget outlook looking better than expected. Revenues maybe didn't drop off as badly as originally thought. They're certainly down, but not by as much, and other things that you were talking about. So maybe it won't be quite as big of a fight over funding in Santa Fe as maybe it had been during the deepest parts of the recession.
That's what we're hearing, and that's coming from the folks that obviously are getting the outlooks and the predictions, but it's not going to be nearly as bad as they thought. And
right.
There's still concern. I mean,
right,
it's not like there's more revenue, because oil and gas is such a big producer of revenue in our state, and we understand people aren't working doing that. And so, again, getting through and getting people back to work is the only way to increase revenue and revenue coming in. And that is something that has been very difficult, but again, the predictions are that the actual deficit that they were expecting is, I venture to say, it was probably cut in half from where they thought it would be, and that's in
right.
billions of dollars, that type of thing. So
we'll
see what happens as we go forward, but there is some optimism that we're going to be able to move through this. It's not going to be an easy session, never is when you have to look at cuts, but it's not going to be as severe as what we once thought.
Understood. And you mentioned a couple other things I wanted to pick up on, and that was some of the mental health and the other things. You mentioned students not being in a school building in 9 months. And as an educator, that's got to really concern you. And maybe you're seeing some data about proficiency and test scores and things like that. And I don't think it's just Aztec that's being impacted. I think students are struggling in some districts, in some cases throughout the nation, throughout the world, because of this pandemic. It's really not just hitting New Mexico, but all over. Is this something you're seeing at Aztec School? A little bit of a concern about your students' academic growth this year?
Yes, and we're seeing it across the board, but we are seeing some gains. I mean, so it's not something. Our elementary schools that we were surprised about where scores were. We're just now giving our second interim test, which is a test we give quarterly to see where they are on their skill proficiency, and so we'll see how those results measure out to the first ones, because the first ones were done virtually in many respects, and now we're doing the hybrid approach with the second interim, where we have students on campus. The secondary levels, big concern. I mean, the failure rate is astronomical. The engagement of students, we've talked about that in the past. So all those things are having to be looked at. We're looking at what we need to do to try to get kids caught up. I think there's some very valuable lessons in this, and positive lessons that can come out of this if we make sure that students, and we've echoed so many times how everything counts and you need to get on and do your work, and some students still haven't chosen to do that. So there's going to have to be some makeup in things they do, and we're being very flexible in the way we're trying to approach this with assignments and those types of things. But the bottom line is, if you're not producing work, you're not going to produce credit, and all those things count. So we will absolutely do triage on our students, the students that need the most feedback, the most assistance, and again, trying to modify scheduling to meet the needs of students and families better. We're getting ready to roll out our one-to-one computer initiative after the first of the year finally, because we had those back ordered. They were supposed to be here in July. So there's all those kinds of things we're still dealing with, but it's an individual district thing. But across the state, I can tell you the failure rate and the concerns in failed classes is at an all-time high. And some would say, well, what did you expect? It's not that we didn't expect it, But even in these circumstances, we have to inspect a certain degree of engagement and work being done, because it's about learning and proving that you have the competency to move forward at all levels. And so we are dealing with that, and that in itself is going to be a whole nother game plan, which we're already preparing for as we come into the next school year.
Right. And what would your advice be, I guess, to parents or guardians who are watching, listening this morning, of how they can maybe work over this break coming up to prepare their students to go back in January and to really maybe do a reset, try to do better in this new online environment or hybrid environment that's going to maybe be the norm for the first few months at least of 2021. We certainly hope to get back to face-to-face classes for everybody, but in the meantime, what's your advice for parents and adults over the break for their students?
I think the biggest thing is engage, and engage authentically. Having students engage in their studies, setting schedules, instead of just working on it when you want, try to stay to a routine schedule. Get up at 8 o'clock, have your breakfast, sit down, do your work, and just schedule it out each and every class. That from 8 to 9 I'm working on English. And sometimes they're meetings, so those meetings are dictated by times. But if you're not in that kind of setting where you're having Zoom meetings or meeting with your teacher, Google Classroom, and you have to set your own schedule, set a schedule that mimics a lot of what the school day looks like. And it may not take you the full school day. However, setting a schedule is one of the first steps, because that obligates your time to do what's important, and that's engage in school and the schoolwork. Connect with teachers frequently. Get in and check the progress of your student every single week, if not more. This is a collaborative experience that we've never faced, where we always talk about how valuable family involvement is in the child's education. It's crucial. It's absolutely, they are part of the partnership more than ever before. And again, it is time, like you said, to reset. Understand where students are, what they need. Make sure you're communicating with your schools to stay on top of things. And most of all, again, as we've put out the hashtag check in with your kids, that is, it's not just a cliche, as a fancy little saying. It's the truth of what we need to do. And when they're on the computer, make sure what they're doing is schoolwork. You may say, well, I saw them get on and log in. Well, that's great. But if you don't inspect what you expect, then we're not going to have that alignment. And that's what we need families to do, is just reset, re-engage, and make sure we're staying in close contact, because every bit of this, of what we're doing, does matter. And it's going to make decisions on retention at the lower grades, summer school at the middle school, and those students at the high school earning enough credits, because there have been some allowances as far as graduation credits, not the number, but the assessments and things that may not have to be taken. But the bottom line is, if you don't have the credits, you're not going to be able to graduate. There's going to be no free passes given.
And let me pick up on that just a little bit, Mr. Carpenter. Will there be some maybe wiggle room with grading for some of your students who have maybe had a harder time than others dealing with this virtual or online classwork and things like that? Is the Public Education Department giving districts a bit of some variance as to what constitutes a passing grade for some students?
The Public Education Department has recommended what they call an equity grading system, and basically what it does is it puts the floor of an F at a 50. It's recommended. We haven't adopted that, and part of the reason we haven't adopted it is because we still feel like if you're going to get credit, you have to make sure you are proving that you're competent in that. With that being said, the flexibility will come in. If students are having trouble because of devices, because of connectivity, absolutely we're working with them, and we'll continue to do that. I think it's a will versus skill issue. If your will is not where you're engaging in the classes, it's hard to help you, and we're not going to change our grading practices at this point. And it's not to be inflexible. But if a student doesn't do anything and we're giving them 50%, which that's a long-standing argument. This isn't anything new on grading the scales. Districts across the country use the floor of an F as a 50, meaning you can't be below that. So if you don't do anything, it's a 50. If you do some that's less than a 50, it's a 50. The idea there is an incentive to give some of these students an opportunity to pass, but it depends on where you are with your district, and we have not adopted that. We will give students opportunity if they failed to make up what parts they failed, try to get them into what we call Edgenuity, which a lot of school districts use. It's their programs that are online where they address the specific classes, and students can engage where they need the help, not the full class, so we can move them through that faster to get their credit. But again, it's about competency-based education. And the amount of work the teachers have done too. In our opinion, what we're looking at is to go back, and if students haven't done anything and they get a 50, or if you've done a lot and you have a 49, it's still a 50, that's not the same. The idea of just getting a participation trophy, in which many respects we can look at this as, is if you're doing work and doing what you're supposed to, we continue to work with you. Even if you're not, we continue to work with you. But it's not a mandate by the PED, but we continually look at it. But we're not making any changes this semester. We're not going to go back and make adjustments. If we make any changes, we'll look at what we need to do or what we can do as we go further. But we are not going to make those adjustments right now. And again, it's not to try to be rigid. It's because of our constant communication and the importance of engaging in and getting the competency at a level that is passable. And if you have every opportunity to do that and you're not doing that, then we need to figure out what you have to do to make sure you get that credit.
Right, understood, and thank you. You mentioned the kind of hashtag program, the check-in with your kids, and certainly this month more than others, our hearts are always with Aztec and the school district, but maybe more than other districts, you and the district has been really at the forefront of reaching out to your students, especially since 2017, to see how they're doing and to get feedback from your kids, to hear how they're doing, and if they're struggling with classes or whatever the case may be. Do you feel you're a bit further ahead maybe than your colleagues in just making sure your students are doing okay during all of this?
I think all the districts have done a very good job with this. I think our approach may be just something that's more known about because it's out there. It's, if you drive into Aztec, you see it. If you drive by the marquee, you see it. If you drive by a school, you see it. Businesses have it. It's been adopted by some districts down south, the same campaign. The public education department has taken the work, and it all started from Thomas Riddle, a middle school teacher, had the idea. We just made it more marketable as a district, but the public education department has taken it, and they want to get it going statewide. So I don't know if we're farther ahead. I would like to think that we are doing our part to reach out, so that people know they can also reach in, because that's an important piece. We don't know if there's issues unless people reach in as well, but our teachers are communicating with students, and all the districts, I think, are doing a great job of it, especially in this time. But again, it just comes down to getting the families on the same page, and that this does matter, and it is important that we get people moving, doing their work, getting it turned in, so that we can ensure learning's taking place first and foremost, taking care of their social and emotional needs equally as so, but we have to make sure we have that constant communication with them, and that's all part of that campaign as well.
Sure, very good. And so the status right now, students are wrapping up for the winter break, and then will they be back? That can come back to the buildings in January? Is that they're going to have that little 2-week break after they come back, or is that the plan?
Well, after the Christmas holiday, we will actually have 2 weeks of all virtual by all students. In fact, we announced that before we got a mandate from the Public Education Department, which meant they mandated everybody has to do virtual. So they came back in and made that after we had made our recommendations. And then on January, I think 19th, Tuesday the 19th, we'll start back with a hybrid approach to small cohorts at the secondaries that we're still allowed to do with certain groups of students. And then at the elementaries, we'll continue with our hybrid approach. There's been no indication that we won't be able to do that. And so again, getting that good start in January with families being engaged, it's going to be online. That in itself is hard for families. I sympathize with them, what they're going through, the students as well. But the bottom line is, it is a new year. It is a new start. And we don't know how long we're going to be in this situation. I wish we had a crystal ball and could tell people. But we have to assume that that's going to be the way we have to deliver our model of instruction until the unforeseeable future, with the exception of the elementaries, unless, again, we get a mandate that says we can't bring them back. But that all goes back to, if we want our students back in school, which is huge, because that puts more people back to work because they're not home taking care of kids. We all own the protocols, and I know people get sick of hearing it, but wearing the mask, washing the hands, not travel unless you have to, not hanging out in big groups, watch what you're doing during the holidays. All of that has impact. one family, two family, all of it has impact. And so we all need to do our part so we can get back to what people want to call normal. But it's not going to happen unless we all take care of what we can in our own individual families, our own individual selves, because we have full control of that. Some of the things we don't have control over, but again, changing the trend lines, all those things will help us with our schools, and but it also can hurt us if we see another big spike after the Christmas break.
True, very true. Just a couple of minutes remaining this morning together. Mr. Carpenter, you mentioned this technology rollout that's going to be happening in January, and if I heard you correctly, it sounds like Aztec schools will be able to offer laptops to, if not all, most of your students in 2021?
Yes, in fact, all of our students will have devices. Initially, it's going to be 4 through 12 with the new devices, but once we get the other devices out that we've issued, we'll repurpose those down to the lower grades, our K through 3rd grade schools. And so we will essentially, hopefully by the end of January, be a total one-to-one with devices that are, and there's already devices out there, don't get me wrong. We've already been working on that, but better equipped to do the one-to-one across the board. And again, long overdue, but we can't control the impacts of COVID when it comes to manufacturing specific pieces for computers, and that's what happened to us. It happened to other districts. We got the order in as quick as we could in the spring. We promised things would be here, but obviously, even making promises, those are being busted with what's happening with the pandemic. Sure,
but that's not a cheap proposal. So obviously, was this some special COVID funding that you're able to use towards this purpose, or something you've been saving for?
No, we had had bond savings in different projects through the years. We always try to save some bond because we have to make the replacements at different times. And so we came to a point and we were told, you need to spend this bond money, can't keep hanging on to it, because we were waiting to see what's going to happen. And so we were able to allocate it to this type of endeavor. And, it was going to take another bond really to get us there. But with the savings we've had, and there's sacrifices to go. We have a lot of teacher machines that are getting older, but what we've done is tried to replace and get student machines in, and then we're just going to keep servicing those faculty machines until we can get to another bond cycle, which may be a few years, several years. We don't know what's going to happen there, but that's why we're able to do this. And it was through bond money and bond savings that we were able to purchase these computers, which is a different fund than what comes out of operational, which is for salaries and benefits and those types of things and supplies to schools. So we had to spend the money on appropriate things, and computers were definitely one that was on the radar to try to make sure we start the replacement, because we have different computers at different ages, but we were able to get a 4 through 12 with new machines, and again, we'll repurpose some of the older ones to get them back in the hands with our younger students.
Understood. Well, I would think that this would help to level the playing field just a little bit for your students if they have access to this technology. That can be helpful, especially during this virtual learning time. And the residents of the Aztec School District probably deserve some kudos for approving those bond funds. How many years ago that's been?
Yeah, it's been several years ago, and absolutely, our community's always been supportive, and we appreciate it. We can't thank them enough. But it's money well spent because it's investing in our future. A lot of the changes in learning that have taken place have just been incredible. Those things won't go away. We only need to get better even after the pandemic. Once we even get kids back in the classroom, we're not going to go back to just sitting in rows and students getting the sit and get, where they sit and the teacher delivers. It's going to be a lot different the way we learn. Technology is a great tool. It's not the only thing that will be utilized, but it will absolutely speed up the learning and give kids access to things as they know them in the real world. And so we're excited about this and this step forward for our district.
Well, very good. And last but not least, Mr. Carpenter, I wanted to ask you about you have uttered the dreaded R word to your school board, and that is a well-deserved retirement at the end of the school year. You made that announcement, I think, just a couple of weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. And so this will be a bit of a change for the Aztec School District because you've been there for a number of years. I don't want to say how long, but I think there's a lot of institutional knowledge that may leave when you do at the end of May.
Well, you're being gracious saying I have some knowledge. All joking aside, though, I had 31 years in the district. 12 as a superintendent, and I've been blessed by the district. I say it and I mean it. It's blessed me more than I ever have blessed it. But it's been a great ride. And not moving away from anything or challenges. I love challenges, but it's just time for me to move forward with retirement, and I'm going to retire into something. I don't know what that is yet. But I'm not going to be done. I don't want to be done. I still want to help educators, whether it's through safety, whether it's coaching, whatever it may be. And that's yet to be seen. But, I have 6 months left, and as I've told the board, every day I spend in here will be just like my first day. I'm committed to the district, committed to helping them find a great new superintendent as well, and doing whatever I can to help with that, because Aztec has been the only district I've been in those 31 years, and it's been a great ride for me. So it's bittersweet, but it's time, and like I said, I'm excited about what maybe the future holds, and there's a lot of anxiousness and anxiety probably that exists with that as well, because I'm not one just to sit around, and I won't sit around. But it's been great, and I thank all the people, the community, everybody, and there'll be time to do that official thanks down the road, because there's a lot of work left, and I'm encouraged by the work that's being done by our great leaders. You're only as good as what you surround yourself with. So if there's anything good happening in the superintendency, look at the different levels, administrators, and all the other people in our district that just do a tremendous job. So it's been a true honor.
Well, very good. Well, again, I know you will be missed, and I'll miss talking to you on our regular spots, but that is 6 months from now. So, and that was one of the, I guess, kind of reasons by design that you made this announcement so early, was to give your school board a chance to prepare and to do this, as they say, probably a nationwide search for the person who will fill the superintendent's office after you leave.
And that's exactly it, Scott. It was not ever intended to be about me, but I think what we have to do, we have to strategically use different modes of media to say this is what's going to be happening, and then people that are interested can start getting ready to apply, and the board will be setting up that process. We're going to do some trainings with the School Board Association to see exactly how the board wants to venture down the road of doing a superintendent search, because it's been a long time. We haven't searched for a superintendent probably over 30 years. Because of the former superintendents and their tenure, and they were put into the positions, as was I. And so, it's going to be a new venture for them, but the board is well equipped to handle that, and I am standing ready to assist in any way I can. Not to continue this as a superintendency under what Kirk Carpenter thinks, but to make sure that Aztec gets in what they deserve, and the board's going to do the same. And that's another great leader at this level, and I sounds funny me saying that, because I'm not sure I'd ever put myself in the category, but we've had tremendous superintendents in here, and we want to continue a lot of the things we're doing, and that's what will be happening, and the board will be leading that charge. So shortly after the first of the year, we should be posting and be trying to move in and get a new superintendent in before the end of the school year, so that we can do some training and together, and they can do some meetings and do all the right things, so that they go into budget understanding some of that, what's happening, possibly even have some input depending on the timing of all things, and just make sure that we continue to move the district forward and move it through this pandemic crisis and reset things next year. And that's my interest too. I'm not leaving it in the middle of things. We will have things set up and ready, because that's what I owe the district, because it has been a part of my life, over half my life, and I've loved every minute of it, and we'll miss it.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of folks will miss you, as will I, and we all have to get together once a month to have a cup of coffee and talk, and whoever hears this will be people sitting in the room next to us, I guess, not the radio audience.
That's okay. I would welcome that. This us meeting and talking it's a highlight every month, and it's not just about you doing your work, me doing mine. It's about the colleagueship and friendship that we have, so absolutely we'll continue that.
Well, I will look forward to that. But in the meantime, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Happy New Year to you and your family, Kirk Carpenter. Please stay safe, and I'll look forward to picking up our conversation in January.
Same to you, Scott, and to everybody out there, same thing. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and again, like you said, let's have a happier 2021 and a safer one, and let's all just do our part to make all that happen, and that's what we're asking from everybody. But again, Scott, thanks for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. We appreciate you being with us. Kirk Carpenter, thank you so much, Superintendent of Schools for the Aztec School District, my guest here on KSJE. Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.